all know newspapers are trying to catch eyeballs. There's lots of tabloid-style newspapers that are just into sensational news, whether they're accurate or not. TMZ is often the first one to publish something, and they're the first one to note that Kobe Bryant died, but they also may get some things wrong, but do they care? I doubt it. They just want to get those views. Some newspapers are still sensational, but they're a little bit more reputable. New York Post has a mix of celebrity gossip, but also carries some real news based in New York. Their articles are short, you never have to read too much. And then you move into more mainstream media, and you would think they don't need a catchy headlines. They have people who go to them for the real news, right? Wrong. They still have side 40 font headlines. Secrets to share, anyone? LA Times is a little bit more bland, just reporting some statistics in the headlines, not so much for eye-catching headlines, but they still need something to attract viewers. New York Times asks, can we please pick their president by popular vote now? And just below, how COVID-19 vaccine could cost Americans dearly. Controversy. It gets people to click. And they struggle to remain relevant. Coronavirus is still something people like to read about. Also, racial inequality. This article about evictions hitting black renters hard. But in general, people like to read about things that are new, unusual, upsetting. And this trend is actually nothing new. In fact, there's a term for that. Yellow journalism, of which William Randolph Hearst was the most famous proponent. It happened over 100 years ago in the mid 1890s. The main characteristics of yellow journalism being scary headlines in big font, many pictures, fake interviews, comic strips. That's not so popular anymore though, and sympathy with the underdog, which pretty much sums up journalism today. Let me read to you an excerpt from the International Encyclopedia of Communication. The manipulation and indeed creation of news by yellow journalism reached its apogee in the war. Critics blame the yellow press for drumming up public opinion and pressuring the U.S. president to enter the war. Exiles in New York City provided the press exaggerated or fabricated reports. The yellow journals seized on information and twisted it. Once the war began, the yellow journals offered up patriotic tales of American heroism in the face of the war. Can this apply to today? Maybe a year later, in the past decades or two, definitely. But this happened over 100 years ago during the Spanish-American War in 1898, when the newspapers publishing pushed the public opinion to get their president to enter a war. Here it is, again. It's just as applicable today. And the big question is whether newspapers are responsible for the distribution of truth, for showing both sides, for sharing the pros and cons of a decision, given there's always pros and cons of every decision, for not sharing fake news. But it's a bit more complicated than that because newspapers are always selective in what they show. If your neighbor had a baby, pretty sure they would report that. If your neighbor were British royalty, you bet they would report that. So I want to take a look at the way newspapers report today, what they report, whether or not they change our perception of coronavirus, and the resulting behavior of the American people. Let's start with this first article published by SFGate. The title is neutral, eye-catching, because we always like to compare ourselves to others, so let's dig in. What mask use looks like in 10 other countries compared to the US. Lisa Pereira notes that mask wearing is an odd, uncomfortable modification of life, especially as temperatures rise. Really? I didn't know that. I wear a mask when I bike around. The temperatures have already hit 100 degrees here in the South Bay, and I was still wearing a mask biking. I don't find it uncomfortable. She notes that amongst Americans there's discord, defiance. Well, I guess you could say that for anything because you have given us no numbers. How many Americans feel that way, or is it just a minority? How small is the minority? Would you say amongst Americans there's claims that the world is flat? There's definitely the flat earth society, but I'd say the vast majority of Americans, 99.9%, don't believe the earth is flat. So it's misleading saying Americans believe the earth is flat. But it's much more eye-catching that way, more emotion-evoking, somewhat like saying the cannibals amongst us, versus in all 5 years they caught one person cannibalizing another in the US. For New Zealand, she notes that it never needed to implement a mask requirement. The wording sounds like New Zealand never asked people to wear masks. But I bet New Zealanders wore masks during the level 4 alert, which lasted over a month from March to April, if they could get them. An author also skips the fact of what New Zealand's restrictions were. She says it was similar to California's non-essential business closures. No, it wasn't. No restaurants were open, not even McDonald's. There was almost no place to get hot food other than the gas station. They were checking to see how many people you had in your car that first week of quarantine. When you're going to grocery, if you had more than one, not allowed. You just need one to go to the grocery store. People are home almost all the time. At home, if you were playing ball and went to a neighbor's yard, the neighbor couldn't touch to throw it back to you. Similar? No. There's no need for masks if you never go out. And it's funny when she talks about Germany. Locals have been understanding. Have you ever been to Germany? The locals don't have to understand, they just do. Germans are wonderful at following rules that don't actually make any sense, just as a Pole. I remember when I was in Germany, we were sitting outside of the beer garden. There were two Germans and a Pole that joined our table. They're talking, and the Polish person made a comment how Germans aren't actually efficient. This is what people think they are. They're just good at following rules. And at the very end, when she talks about Brazil, a country very similar to the US in its reaction to coronavirus, where masks are mostly required, but the president doesn't actually wear a mask himself, she notes that's the second most fatalities after US, but she draws no conclusion, like these are two separate issues. And I wonder if that's because she considers herself as a journalist, just presenting the facts. But the thing is, there's no such thing as just the facts. It's all a matter of perspective. And you always have a perspective or angle or viewpoint. Just look at this picture of Togo's. It's a sandwich chain that maybe was popular, I don't know, years ago, decades ago, but not very popular now. And I saw it the other day and the drive-thru was packed, full of cars. I mean, not this picture, but when I saw it, it was. And I was shocked. Togo's is popular again after the coronavirus reopening? And it wasn't until the second time I passed it that I realized, wait a minute, that drive-thru isn't for Togo's, it's for Starbucks. Ah, that makes a lot more sense. Togo's isn't any more popular before than it is now. I just had a wrong view, and it's the same with newspapers. They have a lot of influence over how people view the coronavirus, what people think about the coronavirus. I know many writers feel it's just their job to get eyeballs, to get views, to get clicks. People don't care about content, they just need a good headline. People don't actually read the stuff inside anyways. Their managers don't care about what they write, they just want people to click on it, so they get ad revenue. But they still do make a huge difference. They can make the difference between people reducing the spread of coronavirus and people saying, hey, it doesn't matter what we do, the coronavirus is spreading in the US anyways. So to show you how it makes a difference of what you write and how you write it, here are my edits for the SFGate article that Alyssa Pereira wrote. What mask usage looks like in the US compared to other countries. Masks are now required in California anytime a person is on or waiting for public transit in common and shared spaces at work or really in any interaction with someone they do not live with. Mask usage is an important safety feature in life now. Experts are in agreement that wearing a mask is important. New Zealand. Ardern shut down non-essential businesses, instituting a level 4 alert much more similar to a quarantine than California's shelter-in-place policy, with no restaurants operating and only supermarkets, pharmacies, clinics, and gas stations open. Germany. After talking about a fine, for reference, Germany is very safe for walking because drivers are very concerned about not yielding to pedestrians, as there is an €80 fine and 1 point on your license. 8 points when you lose your license. By comparison, speeding less than 20 kilometers an hour over the limit has a fine but no point. Brazil. Also, like the US, many Brazilians don't wear masks, including the president, who has refused to wear a mask in public and has been chided by a judge for not following the federal district's policy. Currently, Brazil has recorded the second most fatalities from the coronavirus in the world, trailing only the US. And this is the thing. It all depends on how you say it. Journalists have responsibility too. They can make a difference in how the public, when reading newspapers, views the severity of the coronavirus, whether they should do something about it, or whether they'll continue doing whatever they're doing.